So it is so exciting and important to be here. Rabbi Frankel said to me, Community Center of Brian is going to invite us, Mara Derek, their tour guide here. And I said, let's do that. Let me call Leshnick. And so it's a natural. Just so you should know, I'll give a 1-minute introduction. David Leshnick is not just a treasured tour guide. And to be a tour guide in Israel means that basically you have a master's degree in archaeology, modern Zionism, ancient Israelite history, etc.
Bullshit. There's bullshit in there too.
That's right. And Santarif, which is the word. But David is a young Judean, meaning he grew up in the same Zionist youth movement that I did, that Rabbi Frankel did. And so Zionism is the foundation stone of our existence, as is David's. David was actually the sports counselor and then went on to become the director of Camp Tel Yehuda, the national camp. When I was a camper in high school there. But David has been guiding us across Israel and inside Israel for almost 30 years, David. Unbelievable. How many people here have been on a...
I was 12.
Yeah. So, when you were 12. So I'm about 1 million full of people, and now the 2 people walking in, over 1 million of people are in the room and more online who know you and appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
And so we've asked David here to give us, and the way we think this will work is, this is a one-time talk, and we'll talk about a follow-up to this afterwards. But, we want David to share about a little bit of background as he goes, and about what's going on today, what the matzav ruach is, what the feel in the environment is in Israel today. And at some point, we'll go back and forth with some questions. If there's something pressing along the way, after 20 minutes to half an hour, you say, wait a minute, what the heck's he talking about? Or, can I ask a question? Raise your hand. If you're online, what I'm going to do for all of you online is, I'm going to mute you all, because with great power comes great responsibility. And I don't want to hear you eating your bagel. But I love you. David Kahn, I love you, but please do not chew in the mic. So the gift of David Leshnick is to share with us, and just remind us, David, so where are you? Give us just, the moment, right this second, and then take us through. I muted you. Wait a minute, David, I muted you. Wait a minute. Ask to unmute.
I'm unmuted. Do you hear me?
Now you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the introduction. And, when I think about how I came to where I am right now, which is in my living room in Jerusalem, it started as a kid growing up in a small town in St. James, Long Island. And I had no Jewish friends. As a matter of fact, when I became 15, my father, who had moved us out to St. James from the Bronx, was very, very worried. I had no Jewish friends. The closest group of Jews that were getting together was about 20 minutes away, and my father would have to drive me to meetings, and it was Young Judea. And Young Judea changed my life, just like it changed the rabbi's life. It was an eye-opener to me. Zionism became the central point of what Jews should be doing, what I should be doing. And it took me years. I was a Jewish communal worker in B'nai B'rith. As a matter of fact, for those of you who may remember, 1977, the B'nai B'rith building was taken over by Hanafi Muslims, a Haredi group of jihadists that didn't end up killing us, thank God. But it was the first exposure that I had to basically Islamic fundamentalism and what has been growing in the Middle East and taking over the world. And that's really where I want to jump off on our story of what's going on in Israel today. We're in the midst of a big war. That big war is the war between Muslim fundamentalism and Western civilization. And if anybody forgets that, then you don't really get what the immediate confrontation is between Israel and the Hamas. The alignments have taken place. You can see it throughout the news. You see that the main leader of this war against Western civilization is Iran. They've been able to link up with such countries as Qatar, as Iraq, Syria, and of course has created a number of proxy armies that they've established in conflicts, in local conflicts. One in Yemen, where the Houthis have become their proxy army. In Lebanon, of course, with Hezbollah, that's the proxy army of Iran. And of course, Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, as well as the bigger Hamas. On the other side, where Israel stands with Western civilization, for all intents and purposes, this war that we're fighting right now is a frontline war in that bigger war. And I think that most Israelis today see that. And what's frustrating to many Israelis today in Israel is that the rest of the world doesn't seem to be waking up to who the real villain is in this story. And it is something that you hear about from analysts who are talking on our news shows, and something that's been very much a major part of what we're going through in this war against Hamas. So understanding that as the overall picture of the world war that's happening, eventually, believe me, make no mistake, I believe it's coming to you too. And it's got to be stopped here. And I think that that's why, at least in the Biden administration, there's some understanding of that. Unfortunately, I think America is still trying to somehow contain Iran. And that's why it is limiting to many extents Israel's reactions to the Hamas in this current war, and particularly to Hezbollah, that has been holding off and not escalating the war. However, they've been playing a very dangerous game with Israel at a very weak time that Israel had gone through up until this moment. Which brings us to the beginning of our discussion here, and that is, how did this war start? What happened? What's going on here? Well, I can tell you this, that if you are trying to understand what happened on October 7th, you have to know what was going on here on October 6th. The last government to be elected, the Netanyahu government, a very extreme right-wing government with a number of extreme parties in it, came to power last January. As they did, they entered into a program of reforming the Supreme Court, reforming the judicial system, and for the most part, enabling the government to make all the decisions of the country without confronting the democratic process. And in that way, there was anger that came out of almost, I would even say more than half of the country. We had demonstrations going on every single week in every big city in Israel, demanding that the government, first of all, listen to us, listen to the people, listen to what the country is saying, that you are bringing us into a point of dictatorship. And it was at each other's throats. I can tell you that even the discussion about civil war could be heard at almost every meal, almost every restaurant, every bar. People were talking about how we are going to break the country apart, that all those years, all those wars that we have our people having entertained and entered into battle for. This is what was going on in the government. So people were very, very angry at each other, to the point where pilots even threatened that they wouldn't go to training. That's the key of our life. They are the ones who hold the safety of Israel, and they were not going into training. The reserve army was threatening that they weren't going to go in. There was a situation here where the government was not backing down. And if there was any time in Israel's history that we were the weakest that we could be, it was at this moment. Everything was breaking down. Companies were moving out of Israel. They were taking their money out of Israel. The fears of Israel ending was really very, very real. And in some ways, the attack on October 7th rescued Israel from that division and automatically united the country. Within hours, we were exposed to the atrocities, the sadism, the horrors of our border down at the Gaza Strip. Now, you should know that for years, and this is another concept that you hear very often in Israel today, that conceptia. In other words, what was the conception of Israel versus our enemies? We knew we had an enemy on the other side of the Gaza border. Yet we believed that building a fence would keep them from coming in, that if we allowed the payoffs that were going in through Qatar to the Hamas, that they would behave themselves. Remember, they run, well, not anymore, but they ran the government. They ran every angle of the government, every area of the government. And so we were keeping them alive. Now, why was Netanyahu so interested in keeping Hamas alive? And this you probably have read in some of the analyses, that he was hesitant to continue the negotiations with Abbas of the Palestinian Authority and didn't want to give them too much power. And so he turned to Hamas and basically emboldened the Hamas in their governing of the Palestinian people. Eventually, Abbas would lose any kind of power. Nobody takes him seriously any longer amongst the Palestinians, and Hamas gained popularity. So another cause of what was bringing us to the brink of October 7th. So I think that in order to understand what happened here and where we're going through, we have to understand that as far as the Arabs were concerned, we were very, very ripe for an attack. Not to mention the fact that even within our own intelligence, some of you may have heard that our intelligence unit, 8200, there was a woman who had predicted the exact takeover of the Gaza Strip, and nobody paid attention to her. The arrogance, very similar to the Yom Kippur War back in 1973, when our leaders were convinced that the Egyptians aren't going to break over the border. The Syrians, even though they were amassing their tanks there, and yet, no, they knew better. Well, that's exactly what happened here. As far as our leadership was concerned, they felt that they knew better. There is sexism that's involved here, where chauvinism between the men who were getting reports from the girls who were sitting on the border of the Gaza Strip, reporting that the Hamas are behaving in a way that they've never seen before, with hang gliders, with motorcycles, with attacking Israel, and their commander basically hid the report. Didn't want to hear about it. They saw it physically days before. And because they were the men and they were the women and they were older and they were younger, they knew better. And that's what we're finding every day. We're hearing more and more of what the situation was on the brink of the war with Hamas on October 7th. And then October 7th came. End of holiday month almost. Remember that the holidays in Israel begins with Rosh Hashanah, and then it takes you through Yom Kippur and a very slow Sukkot, and everybody's on vacations. And then came Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah was a great time for a big Woodstock kind of festival down in Kibbutz Re'im, right on the border. It was a great time for people to stay at home, go to synagogue. Here in Jerusalem, people are going to be doing the Hakafot. On the kibbutz, it's not as religious. They're mostly secular, but enjoying the holiday. The kids who were at the festival were probably hungover. They'd been up all night listening to music. As they looked up into the skies, and on hang gliders, entered the terrorists, the Hamas terrorists, shooting away, murdering people, tearing people apart. And as they came in on their motorcycles, and they just sadistically started decapitating. In the kibbutzim, they decapitated babies' heads. These people were ripping people. It was so sadistic. One woman at the festival who was pregnant, the terrorists tore her open and paraded around with the fetus. Rapes. And then after all of this, when this was when the world found out about it, the reactions were to the best. It was for a couple of hours. Everybody was saying, "Oh, how terrible!" And then they started you started getting reports that no, it's not really. It didn't really happen. It was AI. This is not true. They would never have done that. They did. And what eventually would happen with the way the media had treated the whole incident, it was disaster. It was as if they started off trying to figure out where the Jews are trying to lie their way out of this. So you want to know how Israel feels today? Most Israelis are feeling that most of the world does not understand the reason for this fight. Most of the world doesn't understand the necessity for us destroying the Hamas. And meanwhile, the big dilemma, the big question, what do we do with the hostages? They're holding on to, right now, 130 hostages. Are we, going to first put the nation before the people who are being held hostage? That's not what we do. Why do you want to fight for the country if we're going to forget you when you're taken hostage? So we have two prongs in this war. The first one, to destroy the Hamas. It cannot exist anymore. And the world has to understand that we're not going to let that go. At the same time, we have to rescue. If you were part of Israel last week, you were watching a reality show take place where Israel being humiliated as our hostages were being released, as we are returning to them 3 for 1. And what are we returning? We're returning to them terrorists. They're returning innocent people, children, women. And as they're coming out, they're being jeered by the local innocent Palestinians. And don't get me wrong, there are innocent Palestinians, but the world cannot go crazy with thinking that all of these people are hostages to Hamas. They may be in one way or another, but 70% of them in the last poll after October 7th thought that what the Hamas did was they were proud of. They cheered them on. And the fact that we've opened corridors from the northern part of Gaza to bring the civilians to the southern part of Gaza, no other country would ever do. America didn't do that when it went into Iraq and Afghanistan. World War II, nobody worried about civilians. You think that people started collecting all these Germans and saying, oh, they're civilians, they shouldn't be. They're all Nazis. They bombed them. Israel has gone out of its way to risk our kids' lives who are fighting in this war to save civilians. And the word is that every time a civilian gets killed, the front lines of the New York Times is Israel's back at it. This recent break of the agreements of the ceasefire that was going on, the last I saw in the newspaper was that Israel's back to bombing. Well, nobody says that they broke the agreement, that they started firing on our cities in the morning, and we broke the agreement. Of course, they broke the agreement. I think that that's one of the most painful things that you'll find from Israelis today. The experience of having to see the world just disregard or stay silent about what we're going through. And in the bottom line, we are fighting the world's fight. Hamas is not just a Palestinian group that's representing Palestinian resistance and Palestinian hope for the future. The Hamas is part of that entire sadistic, jihadi ideology. That's more important to them than the people. That's why they don't care when we bomb and kill civilians. As a matter of fact, they encourage it. That's why they use them as human shields. The more people that seem innocent or sound innocent that get killed, the more the Hamas is gaining its popularity. That's why it has to be annihilated. That and the Islamic Jihad, which is also operating a little bit less funded than Hamas. Question, of course, is going to be what's going to happen afterwards. But we're doing it. Right now, as we talk, there are soldiers who are crawling through tunnels, looking for terrorists. They've got pictures of them. You know, there's a group of cowboys, Christian cowboys, that came to Israel, and they're trying to keep everybody's, morale up. So they produced decks of cards, and the pictures on the cards are the pictures of terrorists that we're looking for. And they're handing them out to all of the soldiers in the bases so that while they're fighting, they could keep their pictures, really clear so that they could win the day. But it's very, very difficult. I have a son, Omri, and just to tell you what he was doing on October 6th, he had just finished graduating from Bezalel Art School, and he majored in animation. He's a great animator, and he did a project that was featured in Budapest at an animation festival. And on October 6th, he was holding ticket in hand at the airport. The plane was at the gate. And he called me and he said that he had just gotten his call from his reserve unit. And he has to go to the Army. I said, well, why don't you get on the plane? He said, no, Dad. And we've seen Omri twice. He's up in the north. He's a soldier now. Just like if you walk down the streets here in Jerusalem or anywhere, you see very few people from the age of 20 to, let's say, 40, because we've just inducted 350,000 young people in that age group to fight this war. They're like you and me. Well, not like me, I'm too old for it. But the fact is that everybody is in a state of war here. You turn on television, you can't even watch a commercial without the ending of the commercial saying, together we will win. You see signs everywhere you go. You see the pictures of the hostages. It is constant. There's not a single cafe where people are sitting down right now and not talking about what I'm talking to you about. And what are we going to do? What are we going to do with the hostages? How are we going to get them out? Are we going to have, the success of an Entebbe raid, which would be tremendous for us, for the morale? We've got volunteers, everybody is volunteering for something. We do errands for the Army, bringing stuff from one place to the other, even if it's across country. Other people are volunteering to pick the avocados and all of the vegetables that are ripe right now. And there's nobody to work because the Thais left. They were doing most of the farm work. And people are volunteering to do that. People are making food. We didn't have enough food for all those reservists going into the Army. So people got together making sandwiches and bringing it to the bases. Israel's like one big family. And what's happened here, it's as if on October 7th, we had such a violation. We were raped. We were killed. We were slaughtered. And if we're going to stick around this neighborhood, we're going to have to show them that they can't do this again. That don't even mess with us. Now, the fact is that everything that we've done here is affecting you. Jews all around the world. For the first time since the Holocaust, the anti-Semitism is acceptable. That's outrageous. That people could actually put signs on their doors of their cafes and restaurants, no Jews allowed. This is happening in Europe. I don't know whether it's happening in America. I do know what's happening in America, though, as demonstrations screaming from the river to the sea. Most of them don't even know what river and they don't know what sea. But they're totally under the control of a very, very sick kind of support. Anyway.
So David, let me
you can see I've been saving this up to just kind of pour out.
I know this is cathartic, and we'll send you the bill after for this. But I mean, I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then we'll eventually open it up. So, one question is, and you just started to touch on it. It's no secret to us nor to me. And I hope to everybody here and everybody online, we have 35 households online as well, that what happens in Israel is not a world away. What happens in Israel for us as Jews is intimate and very close. And so, we feel a deep, deep connection. So that's A. We're also feeling the impact. As American Jews and American Reformed Jews, we could call ourselves progressive Jews, Yahadut Mitkademet. When we were in Israel, I was with Leshnick in February, and we went to Kihilat Ranan, right? So we went to the community of Ranan, right? And we spent time with Rabbi Orban. What's her name?
Vivian Silver?
No. It was the wonderful rabbi. We were in Ranana, and it was Orben Sfoni. Is that her last name? Maybe Rabbi Orben Sfoni or something like that.
It could be. Yeah.
So the feeling there was all about democracy and taking a stand against the Netanyahu government, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, as David said, all that changed. And today we're feeling a deep kinship. Part of the kinship is the anti-Israel sentiment that is rampant among many in the American public, certainly a far left, but also the alignment of some of our Jews with, justice for Palestine. How do you separate that issue out? You've done it a little bit, but how, as people who hold on to democratic values and want to see compassion, right, for all people, how do we sort that out in our minds, or what do we do with them?
Well, first of all, we educate them that the people that they're supporting would just wipe the table with these people. They're what Hamas would consider useful idiots. The LGBT for Hamas. I mean, ridiculous LGBT. If you're LGBT in Gaza, they kill you. They string you up by your feet. They tear your head off. And for these people who are progressive and on the left to support that kind of thinking, they've got to be educated. They've got to learn, and they've got to see what the reality is. As far as countries in the Middle East that's liberal, you won't find it except Israel. I mean, even in the partnerships that we've made in peace with Jordan and with Egypt, and now we're talking about Saudi Arabia. If you are any of those things, if you're a liberal lefty in any of those countries, you're dead. It doesn't work. So I think that's one way that you've got to convince the progressive. But at some time, I think that there are people that you're not going to be able to convince at all. They've started off with an anti-Israel bias, and it's probably an anti-Semitic one, even amongst the Jews. Jews can be anti-Semitic. I've met numbers of them. And there's, sometimes nothing you can do except reason. And if they're not going to accept reason,
Yeah.
Look,
So let me ask you,
how is it that BLM ended up using a logo of the hang gliders coming in and shooting down Jews and saying that is a great thing? And there's a lot of Jews that are supportive of BLM. Whatever happened to all of the Jews that have risked their lives for blacks in America and the civil rights movement? Where did all that go? Where did our friends go? They seem to have turned on us.
Yeah, only because I know you're connected to it through family. We had actually the last two LT Israel trips, a reunion or a conversation maybe a couple weeks ago, I don't know. And one person said to me, "But how can I trust the Netanyahu government is doing the right thing militarily?" And so I said, Leshnick assured me, based upon the people who are really moving and so. Can you speak to just a little bit about that and where this might be going?
I think that we would be in the same position if on October 7th and waited almost a week for Benny Gantz and Eisenkot to join an emergency government with Netanyahu. If Netanyahu and his partners would have been in control, Gallant happens to be okay. I think he's doing a good job as defense minister. But having to have dealt before the emergency government was formed with people like Smotrich and with Ben-Gvir, it would have been problematic. And I don't think that the country would have followed very well. So I think that what saved the government's leadership in this war is the fact that Benny Gantz, who has a distinguished record that is uncomparable in terms of his military, and he's a decent individual. I know him personally, and it's good that he's there. I feel comfortable that decisions that he's going to make are not going to get our boys killed too much. Look, we're expecting that, and we knew this right from the start. That soldiers are going to go in and that we're going to have casualties. But I feel safer with the Eisenkot, Gantz, Gallant, who are really running the country. Netanyahu is a figurehead right now. I would be amazed if after this thing is over, this government remains. It won't. I'm even wondering maybe it would be a good idea to bring it down even while we're fighting the war. But for all intents and purposes, I don't think that they can do that much damage to the military. So
yeah. So based on that, which is very important, I know you know Gantz personally, so knowing, and Debbie Green actually just texted this, knowing that Netanyahu was never looking for a two-state solution, and and had a very green light, yellow light, green light to the settlers and the settler movement, which I think there were some terrorists among them as well. So like where do we, new government, okay, no confidence whatsoever, new government, maybe a more centrist party, maybe it's Labor coming back in or some. So do we see next steps in Israel, and do we see next steps for what Gaza becomes?
Good question. I think that it's very clear that most of Israel does not want to see the Palestinian Authority in the way that it is now take over in Gaza, because it'll just be another Hamas. They'll figure it out in a few years, and we'll have the same problem. They're a corrupt government, but there is no other. For the Palestinians, that is. Even though most Palestinians don't want them as their government. Maybe we need to elect a new government. Maybe what will necessitate is an Israeli army presence for a longer period than we would like, unless maybe an international force was capable of forming that we could trust and would protect us on our border. Listen, right now, unless it's safe in Gaza, there are some 70,000 people living in 100 communities that won't go home. We won't have any communities along the Gaza Strip if it's not safe in the Gaza Strip. So what you're going to find Israel wanting to do is keep our soldiers there for a while until somebody can replace us and somebody that we can trust. It's going to be very difficult. It's not an easy situation. What we do know is that Hamas can't stay. How do you kill an ideology? You don't. We're not going to kill the ideology. We just have to make them unable to have the weaponry and to have the ability to do what they did. We're going to have to come up with another idea for a border. I mean, fence obviously doesn't work.
Yeah. David could talk more, but I'd love to open it up if people have key questions.
Okay.
So if you have a question online, just raise your hand and I'll eventually get to you. It's going to cost you, but I'll eventually get to you. Adrian, and then Lee, and then Mike. What's that again? No, just talk loud. No, we have an owl, so when you talk, he's going to hear you. I'll stop talking. Okay. Watch.
Technology is great. Hi, David.
Hi.
Tom Friedman, some of you may have seen it, had a column in the Times 2 days ago, and he talked about having a red team and a blue. Did you see it, David?
I'm listening. I didn't read the article.
Two teams that kind of second guess what's going on and what the plans are to make sure they make sense. But what he is saying is, Israel should call for a permanent ceasefire that would be followed by immediate withdrawal on the condition that Hamas return all the hostages, living, and the remains of the deceased. They would get no Palestinian prisoners in return, and then leave it to Hamas to face the challenge of rebuilding Gaza and taking care of their own people. What do you think about that?
If you have the same people like Sinwar, and you have Hania and Mashal in Qatar, and you leave Hamas in power, it would return to the, and what you're saying is, what he's saying is that we would de-weaponize them. They would have no military power because we're dealing with a group that wants to kill us. So they can't stay there. It's got to be a group that is willing to accept the fact that the Jewish people have our own state, and that state is the state of Israel. Now, whether or not they want to hate us for that, that's one thing, but don't kill us. Stop fighting with us.
Thank you.
Listen, Tom Friedman was never my favorite, so I think that he's gotten it wrong so much that I can't have that much faith in his recommendations.
We can.
David, can you talk briefly about what's going on the West Bank and on the northern border with Lebanon and the danger that those present?
Sure. On the northern border, Hezbollah is worse than Hamas and has 10 times more weaponry than Hamas. And their plan is to destroy the state of Israel. Right now, whether it's to the benefit of Israel or to the benefit of others and other powers, they've held off with escalating that war. But that's coming, and we all know it. Our intention right now, I think, is to try to get the Hezbollah to abide by Resolution 1701, which was signed by Hezbollah after the 2006 Lebanon war. And it was that they couldn't move their troops south of the Litani River. That would bring them about 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers north of our border. I think that if we could accomplish that, and just get them to abide by a rule that was already established by the UN, then we could postpone the war that's coming with Hezbollah. As far as the West Bank is concerned, there are activities going on in the West Bank every night. Hamas has a stronghold in the West Bank, nothing compared to what they have in Gaza. However, there are people in the West Bank who think that Hamas is the best thing since peanut butter. And unfortunately, they have started to grumble now. And every night we're having missions that are going into Jenin, into the strongholds where Hamas is strong. And we're killing and we're also arresting. The other night, or the other morning, here in Jerusalem, there was an attack. There were 3 people that were killed at the entrance to Jerusalem that Hamas took credit for. So the West Bank is always seething, but I think that we've got it, under our bootstraps right now. It's not pleasant, but they haven't risen up.
And David, the sort of settler vigilantism, which is so disturbing.
Yeah, look, settlers are a problem from way back, from back in 1967. We had some violent settlers as well. Most settlers that I've encountered are not violent. However, the election, this past election with Smotrich and Ben Gvir has emboldened other extremists, and they are being contained by the police. It's not as rampant as I see in the press, in the American press and world press, but they're a problem that we're going to have to contend with as well. Sometimes we in the last year, before October 7th, there was talk about a violence between us and the settlements and the settlers.
Yeah,
but I don't think that they have the numbers that would support anything that gets really out of hand here. I think that the army and the police can contain them if they're given the green light to contain them. And with a guy like Ben Gvir, who's head of the police, they're not, the only green light they're getting is to continue with rampaging.
Yeah, Michael, and then Marty, and then Eric.
Thanks, David. Prior to October 7th, there were a lot of protests here support because of what Netanyahu was doing with the Supreme Court and all the political action. At least I didn't hear much about the questions of what was going on, which is now all over the news, about the detention of people.
About what?
Are you, wait, hold on a second. I'll repeat the question, David, 1 second.
Yeah,
I don't know why-
please.
Go ahead.
Without what we would consider in the U.S. due process. And that's been a story now all over the news, that there's been a lot of detentions without what we would consider due process for the people, the Palestinians being held in various detentions. Could you just comment on that, why the story has not existed before, whether it's true, and what would be, what the reality is on the ground?
Did you hear that, David?
I think on detentions of Palestinians, right?
Without
Trial.
Process, what is that about? We're hearing a lot more about it now. What's the truth, the validity of that, and how do you understand that?
There's truth. I believe that the law is that a Palestinian suspected of terrorism can be held without trial for 8 months. I think that's it. I'm not 100% sure. You have to check on that. But there is a law that restrains them from holding them longer, as far as I know.
Yeah. So there's some
do
validity.
I agree with it? Listen, I think that as in any democracy, if we could bring them to trial a lot sooner than 8 months, that would be very helpful. If the security services can prove to me that those 8 months saved Israeli lives, then I would have to weigh it. But if you have somebody who could, who's just did something stupid and is considered a terrorist and is held for 8 months, I think it's a terrible thing. But I think that we have people in this country, I do believe, within our court system, who are very democratic, and that's one of the reasons why the Netanyahu government was going at the Supreme Court. They were too democratic for this government, and I think that. But that's a good question on the detention. I think we should. I'll take a closer look at it to see how long they're allowed to hold them.
Marty.
I think most people would agree with you that the attack on October 7th was the most barbaric, bestial thing we've seen in our lives. However, on both sides or all around, people are reacting with anger and frustration. Not the best people to make a clear judgment. Hamas had years to prepare for this attack. They also had very good plans of what was going on in Israel, but they also had plans of where to hide themselves, the leadership, and where to hide the hostages. So what if Israel can't find them? Will you continue to destroy every building in Hamas? Number one, where does it stop? You have it there.
Mm-hmm.
Second question is, what happened during those 8 hours where people were calling for help and the IDF did not respond?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The army, if we had 250 soldiers sitting on the Gaza Strip border on that morning, they would never have gotten to where they got to. We didn't. And the reason that we didn't, as I said before, with arrogance and so on, but physically, over a brigade and a half had been moved from several weeks before for the holidays, moved from the border to protect the settlers in the West Bank. And that is one of the reasons there weren't enough soldiers right on the border. As far as the issue of our retaliation, Israel is probably the most precise army that you can possibly imagine. If there's one apartment, for example, that they want to bring down in a building, they can do it. I just saw a film the other day of how they do it, so that they are targeting terrorists. They're targeting Hamas. They're not trying to kill civilians. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. The destruction of buildings Sometimes if a building represents a base of Hamas terrorists, then they'll bring it down. Look at the issues that we've had right now with going after them in mosques and hospitals. They are so cynical that they prepared all of their bases under a hospital or in a school. Who does that? People who want to see an increase in the only thing that they have to defend themselves is innocent civilians being killed, and convincing a world that Israel is irresponsible. Israel's very responsible. I feel totally confident in our military that we have the most moral army. If an army can be moral, and if war can be moral, and if there are rules and laws in war, Israel will be at the top of the list in carrying out those rules, and even at the expense, unfortunately, of some of our boys and girls. By the way, the girls in this war have excelled. I don't know if you got the story of two tanks with their entire crew of girls who saved Kibbutz Tufa from being hit by the terrorists. They killed the terrorists, some 20 terrorists, before they were able to take the kibbutz. It was amazing. I hope that if anything comes out after this this war, it'll be a recognition of women in Israeli society.
Thank you.
Do I get
Gary.
any votes from the women out there?
We're all sitting next to them. So first of all, thanks for doing this. I appreciate your putting off your cocktail hour. First of all, a comment. I think that you started sort of with a clash of civilizations. I think this is a hard political argument in the US and in the West, because it tends to reduce to an anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant argument, and it's one that Jews have a hard time with in the West. It's one certainly that Jews in the Democratic Party have a hard time with. And much easier argument is a clash of states. So the fact, that it's centered with Iran, with Lebanon in the north, with, surrounded by, at best, moderately friendly to will be friendly if it's in our interest, Arab states, to openly hostile states, is just an easier, it's both true and an easier political argument. So
yeah, but it doesn't enable you to protect yourself.
Well, you have a point there. The problem is that the sense of protection tends to sweep in people who are not a threat, who are living with you, who are, in the countries, who you interact with all the time. You sit around.
You have to avoid that.
So
That's what you have to avoid.
That's
avoid hitting the wrong people.
Yeah, I've heard people say, I've heard commentators say for England, for example, what have you done? You've taken all these people in who are now going to turn on you. Well, true or not, it becomes a much more difficult argument for me. Not that it's completely untrue, but it tends to sweep very broadly. But I meant that more as a comment and thinking about what you were saying at the beginning.
Yeah.
No, I connect to it. I know what you're saying. I just think that if we don't prepare ourselves for what this is really all about, because as far as the Islamic fundamentalist movement is concerned, the jihadists are concerned, there are no borders between states. They're all part of the caliphate. And they are looking to restore that caliphate with Sharia law over the world, because if they don't do that, then they won't have accomplished their mission. And they have to be defeated. That whole ideology has to be defeated. How you do that may very well be in screening immigrants, but you can't just open yourself up to people who want to kill you.
Yeah, and we remember that, of course, that Islam is the pursuit of peace, salam, right? That's what Islam is, right? Islam is not this. This is not this, right? I'm gonna go
Yeah,
with
the
Andy.
Hamas, that's,
Oh,
I
Harry,
think that's,
Harry has a
that should-
comment and a question.
Yeah, I ask only one question, but make a longer comment first. But my question goes to, whether the attack, was a sufficient shock to the system in Israel, the political system, that there may be reconsideration for the notion of more sovereignty in Palestinian areas. So my sense in Israel was a two-state solution was like this idea that, Tom Friedman had, but no one in Israel had. It just completely vanished. And I wonder whether this attack has shocked the political system in a way that might make Israelis rethink it, despite the fact that these two, if there are two states, might be somewhat hostile to Israel.
right now, the country is in a state of mourning. Every night we're watching soldiers being buried. We watched mass burials of those who were murdered on October 7th. Every day is another story about a hostage family, another murder that was taking place on October 7th, their lives, their children, how they're homeless. 200,000 people are right now living in hotels all over Israel. They're not thinking about two-state solutions. They're, quite honestly, if you took a vote right now in Israel about two states, I think that you would find that most people wouldn't even engage to want to have two states as right now. There's nobody to give it to. Who are we going to depend on to be neighbors?
Yeah.
It's so the issue itself is not being addressed. I believe it will be, but I believe that we have to get this over with first.
Yeah. Andy Latchow. Unmute yourself, Andy. Can you unmute? Do I have to ask you to unmute?
I think I just did. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your comments on Thomas Friedman. I agree 100%. What I find frustrating about the conversation so far, not from your perspective, but from the perspective of the questions, is that they largely, and it's typical of Jews, it focuses on what Israel needs to do, what Israel isn't doing, what's wrong with Israel. Israel needs to be more precise. Israel needs to change its leadership. The Palestinians are treated like children with no sense of agency, no responsibility for their plight, which leads me to comment about there are two Abbases, obviously, right? There's Mahmoud Abbas, who's corrupt, as you said.
Mansour, right?
So
and
I want to ask about Mansour Abbas, the leader of the Arab list in the Knesset, who came out with a remarkable statement a day or two ago, which I'm not sure was reported very much in the Western media. And I want to read it first, because I think it's pretty remarkable. It's almost Sadat-like. He said, and for those who don't know, Mansour Abbas is the leader of the Arab list in the Knesset, which is one of the largest parties in the Knesset. And he said—
He was part of the Naftali Bennett government.
Yes. He said, in order to move forward, the Palestinian militant groups need to throw down their arms. They need to work hand in hand with the Palestinian Authority in order to realize a national movement that will aspire for a state of Palestine in a peaceful solution alongside the state of Israel. A pretty remarkable statement for an Arab leader. And I'm wondering what, if anything, can Israel do with Mansour Abbas with a statement like that? Because clearly Mahmoud Abbas has no credibility, and clearly Israel can't work going forward with Hamas.
First of all, the thing to do is make sure that Mansour Abbas and his party are part of the government. They did an excellent job in the Naftali Bennett government and the Lapid government, and his voice should be heard throughout the Arab community and the Jewish community. Obviously, there are many on the right wing who sees that having an Arab party as part of the government is detrimentally wrong for Israel. I think it's detrimentally right to have the Arabs be the Arab Israelis be represented in our government. Unfortunately, most of the Arabs don't think that way. If it did, then there would be, even amongst the Israeli Arabs, who are supportive of terrorists. And that still has to be changed. I think you're right, 100% about Mansour Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas, on the other hand, is old and everybody's waiting for him to die. What will take over, maybe this war will have changed the kind of leadership that they'll want to replace Mahmoud Abbas with. And maybe the Palestinian Authority will take more responsibility for building a state than they have. Right now, most of his leadership, him included, have become multi-billionaires. They run around the world making their lives out of pleading the Palestinian cause, but at the same time, they live in luxury. And that's problematic for the Palestinian people. It's one of the reasons why they don't trust them. By the way, the Hamas leadership do the same thing. It's not like all that money that has been provided to Gaza or been provided to the Palestinian Authority has gone into the hands of Palestinians. It's gone into the hands of corrupt leadership. Maybe at some future point, there'll be better leadership. That's all I can say. But as far as Israeli leadership is concerned, I think that Arabs should be in our government and have a say.
Last question.
I have can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a tangential question to that, which is, in the American press, we hear absolutely nothing about Egypt except they are part of the blockade. And in terms of the humanitarian risks, I'm curious as to what Israel feels about the fact that Egypt here is essentially perceived as, a road into Rafah. And is offering absolutely no assistance, humanitarian assistance. I'm curious what you think about and what the Israeli press says about Egypt.
The volume on that was not good. Could you repeat the question?
So what does Israel, the Israeli press, feel about Egypt? Since Rafah is a gateway, but Egypt itself provides virtually nothing in the way of humanitarian aid.
Won't let anyone in.
And won't let anybody into it. But in other words, it's a NIMBY issue. It's a NIMBY issue, not in my backyard, right? So,
well, okay. Welcome to the conflict in the Middle East. 1948, the Arabs of Israel sought their protection from the other Arab countries. The Jordanians relegated them to the West Bank. The Egyptians relegated them to the Gaza Strip, and they didn't want to have anything to do with them. They didn't want them. They didn't want to help them. They wanted them to disappear, just like they wanted the Jews to disappear. And then as time went on, they were able to use the Palestinians as their own pawn in their game against Israel. Then they made peace with Israel. And now we've got the Arabs of the West Bank, the Palestinians of Gaza, and Egypt doesn't even want to give a hint that they can come through the border and live in Sinai or live in Egypt. The Jordanians, Abdullah said, we would be breaking diplomatic relations if any of those Palestinians get into Jordan. The truth of the matter is you could draw a very strong case for the fact that Jordan is Palestine. That is, you won't use that expression anywhere around the diplomats today, but the truth of the matter is that maybe we'll save this for another lesson, Rabbi, of Jordan's totally cutting off the Palestinians from having anything to do with them. So that's really your answer. The Egyptians just don't want to do anything, not for them. And they will definitely go to war with Israel if we try to even push one Palestinian on them.
So David is hinting at my last question, which I'm not even going to ask him, which is what can we do? What should we be doing? Number one, show up. That's very good. 35 households online, another 40, 45 here. Awesome. But as you can see, this is the beginning of an understanding that is so complex and multifaceted. In order to really get a little bit more of a handle on the situation and the complexity, David and I had spoken, and we thought it'd be great to do a conversation or a mini course in modern Zionism. David's the guy, right? I'll try to be there as well as, you know, for part or all of the sessions. But we thought maybe, you know, we don't know when it's the beginning of December now, right? Is that what month we're in? About to be Hanukkah. We thought right after the holidays, we would do a 3 or 4 session course in modern Zionism.
Good.
Conversation for everybody, and David will be here for that course and be the teacher. That's A. B is read everything, but don't believe everything you read. Meaning
Authenticity.
Right. Have a critical eye. Have a critical eye. And the third thing is, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, Israel is a personal challenge, a personal religious issue. It is a call to every one of us as an individual, a call which one cannot answer vicariously. That means you can't sit in the bleachers and say, oh, that's a shame. Right? That's not enough. You have to be involved, engaged, the conversation, etc. You have to be, I think, pro-Israel. It's possible to want justice for the state of Israel and to want mercy and compassion for all people, including Palestinians who need a place to be and live securely, safely, and sanely, accepting the state of Israel, right? So I think it's possible to want both things. Before I do a prayer for the state of Israel, brief, David Leshnick, you are a gem as always. We appreciate you so much. And you're a natural, you know, you could talk anybody's ear off, but I love to listen. It's great. It's great. David.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So just so we share, we're going to conclude Avinu Shabashamayim, Shul Yisrael V'Gololo, Baruch Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, Hagein Aleha Bavrat Chastecha, Ufros Alas Ukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'Amitcha, Lorasheha, Sareha V'Yoetzeha, V'Takneim Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha, V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'Simchat Olam V'Yoshveha, V'Namar Amen. Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and guide it. Guide them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and joy for all who dwell there. Amen.
Amen. And happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Thank you, David. David, love you. Thank you.
Hi, David.
Mea chus, Habib. Mea chus.
Toda.
Nidaber.
Okay.
Bye.